Okay, so lesson 3-4. We are going to do some estimating with our fractions, and we are going to be doing some comparing and ordering with decimals as we go along. But we're going to round, okay? And that's the biggest thing I think I want to point out before I go to the next slide, is please round. I do not want you doing common denominator stuff and going through all of the steps and things like that. This is mental mathematics. Yes, you may write notes down for yourself as you're going through problems, but please do not do all of the steps. Estimate, round, get close, so on. Again, this is where our mental mathematics, and this is where the whole thing, again, as we've talked about, does my answer make sense? When you do a problem out and you do all of the steps and you show all of the work and do every little piece, at the end, when you have an answer, can you look back at it and go, does my answer make sense? And that's where the estimating of things come into play. So first of all, a few benchmarks or things that we need to take into consideration is to round to 0 if the numerator is much smaller than the denominator. If we have a fraction and the numerator is just a tiny portion of the denominator, round that part to 0. Round to a half if the numerator is approximately half of the denominator, and then round to 1 if the numerator is nearly equal to the denominator. And again, most of this will be done in your head, but in this particular case, if you do want to make some notes, that's fine as far as when I say notes on your paper of what you're rounding to. But I don't want you doing all of the common denominator work and things like that, okay? So, and again, my benchmarks for rounding my fractions, these are the same that were on the previous page. So if you want to use the previous page you can. They're the same notes. So I'm going to subtract 4/7 and 13/16, and yes, normally we would use common denominators, but in this case we're not going to do that. Okay? We are just going to round things off. So using my little notes, and when I say using my notes here, yes, you're going to write down what you're rounding these to, but we're not doing common denominator. Okay, 4/7. 4/7, we're going to round that part to basically a half. Okay, why? Because 4 is basically half of 7. It's not exactly half of 7, but it's close. So 1/2. 13/16. Well, 13 is almost all of 16. So that part we're going to call 1, okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to subtract 1/2 out of 1. Well, if I go 1/2, or sorry, said that backwards, I'm going to subtract 1 out of 1/2. So when I do that, if I take, and again, going back to my rules, I will, because this is a positive, and this would be treated as a negative, I would subtract them. So 1 minus 1/2 would be 1/2. And I would go with the sign of the larger number, which in this particular case would be the -1, so I have a -1/2. Again, we are just estimating, we are rounding things off, so my solution to 4/7 minus 13/16 is approximately a -1/2. I don't care if they're not, just close enough. All right, 3 and 3/8. 3 and, well, 3/8. 3 out of 8 is almost half, so we're going to call that 3 1/2. 3 1/3, well, 1 out of 3 is probably closer to 0, so we're just going to call this 3. This, you could say 0/3, but 0/3 is, so we're going to go ahead and add them together. Well, 3 plus 3 is 6. 1/2 plus nothing is 1/2. 6 1/2. Again. So 3 3/8 plus 3 1/3 is approximately 6 1/2. We're not talking about perfection here. We just want an idea of what the answer would be. So if you were to have done this problem and done all of the actual work that is required, hopefully your answer is around 6 1/2 when you're done. If not, you have a problem, you need to go back and check again. All right, same thing with our rules. We're rounding to halves, zeros, and ones. So, 5 and 7/8. Well, 7/8 is almost a whole. So I basically have 5 plus 1. Remember, there's and here. 5 plus 1 is, so this part here is basically 6. Okay, negative 2/5. Well, and you could go either way with this one. If you wanted to call this a half, you could. It's close enough to a half. Some of people would actually round that to 0, and they could. Either way, for our purposes, it's probably close enough. 6 plus a negative half, which is 6 minus a half. Well, 6 minus a half is 5 1/2. So our answer is approximately 5 1/2. All right. 4 and 5/6. Again, 5/6 is basically 1. So this is 4 plus 1. So we'll call that 4 and 5/6. We'll call that 5. 1/7. 1 out of 7 is not much of it. That will give me to my 0 here. So this would be 3 plus 0. Well, 3 plus 0 is 3. And so 5 minus 3. Well, 5 minus 3 is 2. So 4 and 5/6 minus 3 and 1/7 is approximately 2. Again, these are just estimates. We are not looking for perfection. Multiplication and division. Just because I have changed things doesn't mean that I'm going to change my rules for rounding. I'm going to do the same exact thing as I have been doing. So 4, so this is 4 plus, well, 2 out of 7 is not much, so 0, we'll call that 0. So 4 plus 0, this is just 4. All right. 9/10, well, that's almost 1, so we're going to go 6 plus 1. So this part, 6 and 9/10 is basically 7. 4 times 7 is 28. So 4 and 2/7 times 6 and 9/10. If you were to have done that out, doing all of the steps and everything, your answer should have been around 28. So 11 and 3/4. Well, 3/4 is basically a whole. So this 4 or 11 plus 3/4, this is basically 12. Okay. 3 and 4/5. Well, 4/5 is basically a whole. So 3 plus 1 is, this is 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So 11 and 3/4 divided by 3 and 4/5 is approximately 3. Again, if you were to have done that out, doing all of the steps and things required by the mixed numbers and the fractions and so on, hopefully your answer is around 3. If it's not, you have a problem and you need to go back and try, or I'll figure out where you went wrong. So, all right, 2 and 4/7. Well, 4/7 is about a half. Okay, so in this particular case, we have about 2 1/2 times 4/5. Well, that's almost 1, so that's a negative. We'll call this a -1. And we'll use our rules here. Well, 2 1/2 times 1. Well, anything times 1 is that number that we started with. So we've got 2 1/2. And a positive times a negative is negative. So our answer there is approximately -2 1/2. Roughly. Again, it's just an estimate. 4 and 3/4. Well, 3/4 is close enough to 1 to call it 1. So this we'll call 5. And this is basically 2. And so this is where, 5 divided by 2, if you wanted to. I mean, this is easy enough. We could even do as sort of a mixed number type of idea, because remember, this could be dealt with as a fraction. 5 over 2. Okay, well, 2 goes into 5 twice, with 1 left over. So it's approximately 2 1/2. Again, just in the ballpark. We just want to have an idea. We want to be close. And so 2 1/2 is approximately the answer. All right, that'll do it. So good luck. Come see me if you need to work out any ideas. So.